Virtualization's role in security is kind of like I mentioned before, it's taking those dedicated security services and applying them onto that host workload or multi-tenant environment, especially as we talk about multi-cloud or not knowing where hosts or even where your data is stored. So being able to apply security in virtualization, it helps you with things like, we're going to talk about it later, but like roles in zero trust or being able to consolidate technologies and not being able to, not having to traffic steer to another bare metal box to do any sort of advanced inspection outside of like IP port protocol.
Have you had discussions with customers with regards to dealing with building a zero trust program using a virtualized environment?
We're still at the early stages of, like we've talked about in the earlier sessions, on zero trust being an approach, right? It's not a specific technology or even a specific set of technologies. It's really a way of rethinking how you're looking at identifying assets, databases, workloads, in a different way. And when you move into a cloud-based environment, regardless of vendor, you have to start thinking about attributes, right? And things that you give access to resources in a different way that's frankly ephemeral, right? I never trust you. I always never trust you. There are tools and there are solutions, but it starts with, I'm going to fundamentally rethink how I vend and think about trust.
A lot of them want to start, because again, working for VMware and having isolation and being able to microsegment, they say that microsegmentation is too hard, or they want to start immediately there. And I have to kind of take them back and ask them, well, where are you stuck? And it's typically under like asset management or being able to clearly identify even not just people, but machine to machine, like what's actually communicating together. So it's being able to map those out and say, yes, you actually have the tools to do this today, and then work from there. That's typically where I start when people start throwing out zero trust.
What specifically in lift and shift does not work?
The first thing is shifting the decades of mistakes from traditional data centers and traditional perimeter and traditional basically architectures from the 90s to any cloud. That'll get you nothing more than headaches, cost, and increased exposure. So when we look at hardware-based security, security is actually tied to a device that is typically static, or that's what the aim was. I believe people confuse that digital transformation with actual replatforming. So replatforming is like lift and shift, like you mentioned, but it's just minor tweaks to get it to work in the cloud. That's completely different than what a digital transformation is.
What are like some of the top 2-3 concerns people have when they begin virtualizing?
A lot of it that I'm hearing is like disaster recovery. Like, how does that work? Because again, we think about traditional HA from like a firewall or like a network device. So it's like, how does disaster recovery work? Or they think of these like monolithic spine and leaf type scenarios where everything comes into like one hub and then it gets dispersed out, or like some sort of huge load balancer in place. So it's that, and then not thinking of it as breaking it out into like micro segmented instances, or being able to have copies of those environments throughout globally, and being able to load balance that way and use the native security controls that are provided, as well as what they offer, like the load balancers and any sort of WAF and those types of functionality.
I want your take on this. Document the security configuration for your VMs because it is easy to recover the image and overlook the hardening configuration.
Actually, do document it, but actually use automatic documentation. There's a number of tools out there that automatically document your virtual environment. No one should be able to do that by hand. Anytime you have a human involved, it's prone to have mistakes. When you start dealing with any aspects of virtualization, whether you're in an entirely small environment, maybe 3 or 4 VMs, to hundreds of thousands of VMs, you want as much automation as you possibly can get, because duplicating that environment is really difficult.
Automate everything as much as possible. Make sure it's consistent, make sure it's secure, and think of security as seamless. It's not a speed bump. We're actually fun when you talk to us. Even though I may have real hardcore RBF, I'm really a nice person to talk to.
You need to really look at 4 things. Protect your management environment. However you want to do that, just protect it. The next one is look for toxic combinations. Have automatic monitoring, automation to detect things that shouldn't be happening. the ones you know about. The next one is to ensure the environment doesn't DDoS itself. You really don't want your virtual environment killing itself. The last one is detect unknown unknowns and prevent or remove the things from the system that are known problems, and use some form of user environment behavioral analysis, looking for all those unknown unknowns because they do exist.